this was kind of an introductory presentation to modeling inside of Blender. And so, like I said, Blender is from the same realm as 3ds Max or Maya, if you've used those. So basically, now we're kind of talking about the core concept of the modeling tools provided by 3ds Max and Blender, and basically how they differ, and the kind of important things that you have to keep in mind if you want to be successful with those tools. So yeah, and once again, so this presentation was done for Creative Tuesdays, yeah, now it's kind of coming in handy for this meetup because yeah, it's kind of straight to the point. But if you're curious about photorealism, you can check this out on Tuesdays. However, right now we're kind of covering just the modeling part of this. So yeah. So in this presentation, I kind of talked about kind of the secrets for to make models for photorealism successfully. However, the thing is, and yeah, basically, I think we can get straight to this slide, which is this concept of subdivision surfaces, and maybe some CAD software also offers subdivision surfaces or something similar to that. However, yeah, this is, I'm not sure what the differences are between those and the ones offered in Blender and 3ds Max. However, yeah, we'll just cover that part. But, you know, I guess if you've used those, then you can kind of get the idea. So basically, so when we're talking about models in Blender, so in CAD, you're used to basically taking some, you know, NURB surfaces, and then you can subtract them, and you can kind of merge them together, and they're very precise. However, you don't really get that precision in Blender, especially when you use subdivision surfaces. So I want to talk about, you know, why we're using subdivision surfaces and why they're important, first of all. And so basically, yeah, so this is once again, I'm highlighting the problems that usually ruin the photorealism. Is basically, you know, infinitely, let's look at the first two, which is infinitely sharp corners and not enough geometry. So in CAD, you don't have this problem where you know, quote unquote, don't have enough geometry, because those are NURB surfaces. When you zoom in, when you zoom the camera in, that geometry can be just, you know, created. However, in Blender, it's like you're working with just raw, you know, polygons basically, and if there's not enough polygons and you want to add more, then you have to do that manually with different tools. You know, second problem is the infinitely sharp corners, and this is you know, of course, we are in computer graphics and everything is just looking super perfect. And, you know, honestly, the corners are so sharp that even if you would just touch them, they would probably cut your hand. You know, basically we get around this, this lack of smoothness with subdivision surfaces, and it kind of makes the forms organic and allows us to then basically try to get that sharpness back using you know, different techniques that we'll discuss. So yeah, and now basically, you know, I think it could be better if we're just jumping between presentation and back so that I can show you what I mean. So, so what I mean by these hard surfaces. So I'm just, so I have just opened Blender. It's a blank project, and you should have this cube in here by default. And so you just, what you just saw me do is I just entered edit mode and exited it. So yeah, I guess we'll get into the interface a little later, but yeah. So first of all, so when we're in object mode, we so we can basically, click on different objects and move them around. And basically on the right here, we can also change different settings for each object. Basically everything that is under this collection icon, that's kind of unique for each object. And so we can change all these settings for each object, and most basic being just their position. However, you can use these tools here and basically move them around how you like. But what I just did here was I entered edit mode, which allows us to edit the actual geometry. And this is going to be, unique for each object. Every object, has kind of its own container. If it's a mesh object, then it's going to have a mesh that you can edit. And you can see it kind of opens up all these tools here. So now, basically, so we have a cube, right? And it is not a NURB surface. We can click on every polygon and we can move it around using the same tools that we have here. We can also use shortcuts, but we'll get into shortcuts later. For now, we'll just use the tools available on the screen. Basically, yeah, if we wanted to kind of make cuts and start extruding things out, we can just maybe, so there's the, actually, I think C, oh no, C is, I think K, yeah, K is the cut tool. And we can just click on the edges, make a cut, maybe, and then go into the edge mode. Yeah, by the way, you can switch between those three modes. So first is the vertex mode that allows you to change, basically select and do operations on vertices. Then there's the edge mode that allows us to move edges around. And then there's the polygon mode, which allows us to, of course, move polygons around. So now to get to the point, so let's say we wanted to make, so first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press X on my keyboard, and I'm going to say dissolve edges. And there's a difference between, you can see if I press X again, it brings up this menu. There are all these options, and it gives you an option to delete edges, or you can dissolve edges. So if you press delete, then you can see it's gonna basically punch a hole in your mesh, which is another important difference, I believe, between CAD software and software like 3ds Max and Blender, is that I believe that every mesh is a closed mesh in CAD software. However, in Blender, it's so raw that you can just cut a hole in your mesh just like that, and then there's this kind of infinitely kind of thin surface. Yeah, and then it kind of leaves these extra vertices over here. But okay, so basically what I was trying to say is, the difference between delete and dissolve is that dissolve will remove the edge without trying to also remove the polygons around it. It's kind of saying, remove this edge, but try to keep the polygons, try to basically, keep that surface on there. Don't delete the polygons, delete only the edge. So, however, when you delete the edge, then it's like any polygons that are attached to the edge, it's gonna kind of delete them. So both of the polygons that the edge was attached to, you can see got removed. However, if I were to press dissolve edges, then well, yeah, in this case, this is not the best example, but yeah, it's just a different operation that's not going to like punch holes in your geometry. So yeah, now so I'm going to select this edge. I guess you can select any edge you want, and I can press Control B right now, and that's gonna and as I start to drag, so this has basically so this has executed the bevel tool, and now before we press the left mouse button and kind of confirm the operation, we are sort of in the tools mode, and we can you can see kind of at the bottom, like kind of below the timeline, it kind of resets the cursor, and at the top. But basically, you can see kind of below the timeline, there are these options, and it also allows you to do some shortcuts. And what I'm doing right here, I'm just scrolling my scroll wheel, and that kind of allows me to basically increase the segments of the bevel. So yeah, and yeah, basically the point I'm trying to make is, so if I apply the operation, and let's say, so as you can see, we can kind of see that maybe if I turn on this, you can see that, you know, the surface is not perfectly smooth. And basically, I mean, first of all, we can kind of solve this issue with smooth shading. And so we want to right click on our geometry, we want to press shade smooth, and then we want to go into this green tab, which is called Object Data Properties, and then you can click down on normals and press auto smooth, and now it's gonna basically smooth any edge that has an angle below 30 degrees. So you can see these polygons right here had an angle below 30 degrees, and as you can see, it's now appearing smooth. And this is very important for mostly for game development, when you're working with kind of geometry that is not very dense, but you still want to get smooth results. So now, but basically now, as you can see, so like I said, we're working with raw geometry. So if this is not smooth enough for you, you have to basically, you know, either press Control Z, or if that's not an option, you need to basically kind of delete everything here and kind of get that geometry back. And basically, oh yeah, by the way, I'm just moving this around very quickly. So these are the snapping tools that I want to use, basically. So if I turn on this snapping option and I set this to vertex snap, and then I want to snap with center, then that kind of allows me to do this. And you can see I kind of got the shape back. So, and yeah, and now I'm going to press A. I'm going to go to vertex, or no, mesh, and it's going to be merge by distance. And now it kind of merge these two parts together, and then we can apply the bevel operation again. And so yeah, that's kind of how the process works. And you might be looking at this and you're thinking, well, yeah, well, why would I learn Blender? This doesn't seem very intuitive. I mean, in the you know, if it's really such a big kind of issue, because if you're coming from the CAD world, and you know, this is an issue. However, in Blender, this is an issue. This is not actually the kind of the strength of Blender. This is just kind of to illustrate what you're dealing with. You're not dealing with NURB surfaces. You're dealing with raw geometry, and this is of course a strength and a weakness, and I guess we'll get a taste of both in this workshop. But yeah, and of course Blender and software like this has, you know, ways around it, but there's always a reason why sometimes, you know, some hard surface modelers, and we'll be going into organic modeling. Now so what I just show you right here is not really organic modeling, that's more of a hard surface modeling. And that's why hard surface modeling is usually easier in software like in CAD software, because the tools are just kind of designed for just cutting into things and stuff like that. Yeah, now let's go back to the presentation. Okay, so I guess I have to swap once again. Yeah, so now about subdivision surfaces. So subdivision surfaces basically solve this problem of not smooth enough surfaces. If your model is modeled in a way that kind of works with subdivision surfaces, it's gonna like smooth everything, and you'll have the kind of the opposite problem of what was before infinitely sharp corners. Nothing in this when you're basically when you convert your model to a subdivision surface, nothing will be actually sharp. Everything will be smooth, and if you want to get that sharpness back, you'll need to use some techniques that we'll discuss. And basically, this is kind of bringing in some of that CAD power to polygon modeling. As you can probably tell, it sounds like a pretty important problem, when you can't adjust the smoothness of your geometry when you're modeling. If it's not smooth enough, you basically have to redo it. And subdivision surfaces are kind of a way around that in programs like Blender and 3ds Max. And this is basically non-destructive smoothness. And what I mean by non-destructive is that it's, once you press, basically, once you turn on the subdivision surface, you are editing the kind of the low resolution mesh that is not subdivision, that is not a subdivision surface. And then subdivision surface is like a layer on top that's just smoothing the geometry and giving you that smooth result. So it gives you kind of that flexibility where you can work on sort of like a cage mesh. Basically, that's what it's called, like a low poly cage mesh that you're working on, and then subdivision is taking care of the smoothness. So yeah, and let's kind of take a look at how it works. So I guess we'll skip this slide. Oh yeah, maybe I guess we can have a look at this too. So basically, if the subdivision is so great, then why doesn't everybody use it? Why do we still sometimes stick to these techniques? And that's basically because especially if you're doing hard surface stuff, it can be more time consuming to clear up all the artifacts. And if you don't know what you're doing, then you're just going to have artifacts and your models are not going to look very nice. So if you're working with subdivision surfaces, it's important that you know what you're doing. So otherwise you're going to give up. So yeah, let's now discuss how they work. So basically, so this is kind of an illustration of our cube mesh and what happens when we apply the subdivision surface modifier to it. So basically what it does first, as you can see in the animation, it's gonna split every polygon into 4 other polygons. And this is basically one iteration of that split is called basically a subdivision level. And so level 1 is going to be, it splits it once, and level 2 is going to be, when it splits it twice and smooths again. And so that's how basically subdivision works. It increases the geometry and then it smooths it. Like I said, if we want to get smoothness, we need to create more geometry. And if we don't want to do this manually, we are letting, something like subdivision do it for us. And yeah, so basically, Yeah, so I think it kind of explained everything. So it splits the object into four other splits every polygon into four other polygons, and then it smooths them, basically creating more geometry and then smoothing them. And now, so this is an example of how modeling with subdivision surfaces is kind of done. So as you can see right now, so this is kind of the manual way. So if you wanted to create a smooth surface using manual tools and kind of doing like this, imagine. So now we're back in Blender. I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to press Control, I think Control W. By the way, yeah, I have a different set of shortcuts that I use normally, so I'm kind of just trying to recall what are the default Blender shortcuts. But yeah, so Control R is the shortcut that I was looking for, and this is basically like an edge split tool. So right now I haven't clicked away, and when I hover over polygons, it allows me to kind of split the polygon into like multiple polygons. And kind of introduce edges here. So, and when I scroll the mouse wheel up and down, it allows me to basically add or decrease the amount of segments. And when I click, yeah, by the way, one additional feature that it does is it kind of goes into the second mode, which is you can kind of slide them around, but we don't want to do that. So, and if for everything that we for every operation that we don't want to do, we can just right click, and then it's going to cancel the slide operation. As you can see, it's called loop cut and slide. We did the loop cut, but we canceled the slide operation. So yeah, so now getting into this, imagine if I try to create a smooth surface like this by kind of doing it by eye. That doesn't seem very intuitive, does it? And imagine if you needed to get something twice as smooth. And even if you're a superhuman and you just have an eye for smooth surfaces, it's never gonna, you're never gonna get it so perfectly smooth, and it's always gonna show. So this is just a very, dumb way to do this. But that's why we have subdivision surfaces. And I guess I can introduce you to subdivision surfaces right now, actually. So I'm going to go into the this Modifier Properties tab. So right now I'm in object mode. You can, I don't know if I mentioned, but you can switch between object mode and edit mode using tab. That's kind of a quick shortcut for that. And so if you want basically to apply subdivision to this mesh, you can add it as a modifier, basically, kind of like in 3ds Max. If you use 3ds Max, it's kind of the same workflow. You have your raw geometry, and then you can apply a bunch of modifiers to it. And we'll get into modifiers soon and what they can bring. But the most essential one, especially if you're doing organic stuff, is going to be subdivision surface. So let's click on Modifier and Subdivision Surface, and this is basically what it does. So right now it says levels viewport, and it says 1, and you can see there are separate levels for viewport and render. And the reason these two are separate is so that let's say maybe you are working at level 1 because you want fast and snappy experience in the viewport, but when you're actually rendering things, you want a higher level. So that kind of clears that up. And also, yeah, by the way, so we have actually the ability to turn on the wireframe, I believe, if we click under this overlays drop down. You can see there's this wireframe option, and so this allows us to see all the all the actual edges that our mesh has. Although you can see that it's not displaying these edges right here. Like for some reason, it's displaying these ones, but these ones are not displayed. So the reason that's not displayed is because we have this optimal display turned on. And you can see now it's actually showing all the edges. And so as you can see, what it did already is it introduced more geometry. If we turned it on and off, if we click on this kind of monitor icon, we can toggle it on and off. And you can see it's totally procedural, right? So it's not like set in stone. I'm not pressing Control Z. It's just a layer that's sitting on top that's that will apply a layer of subdivision after you know, after whatever we have modeled here. So, and we can increase the levels, and you can see now it gets really smooth, and now we have actually a smooth surface. And if we keep cranking this up, at some point we probably wouldn't need to have this you know, shade smooth thing happening, because there would be just so much geometry that it will look smooth by default. But yeah, I'm gonna turn off this wireframe right now, because I have kind of illustrated my point, and you can see like the edges that were sharp before, now they are smooth. And we'll get basically, and there is a way to, there are a couple ways to actually sharpen them back up. So, and we'll get into that later, but basically my point was, we don't need to create huge amounts of geometry. You know, we can probably, you know, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, now I'm going to hold shift. So I'm in edge mode right now, and I'm also in edit mode. So I'm going to hold shift. I'm going to select the bottom edge, and I'm going to select the top edge. And then I'm going to press the X key, and I'm going to do collapse edge and faces, I guess. And yeah, so, and this is going to basically merge those two edges together and create this one edge. You know, basically what it does is, let's turn off the subdivision surface really quick, is that feature kind of takes an edge and merges both of the points that the edge has into a one point. So kind of this, and you know, basically I used it to kind of merge two edges together. But as you can see, we can create like a rough sketch of our, yeah, by the way, snapping is on, we have to turn that off. We can create like a rough sketch of how our smoothness, of how our smooth surface is going to look like. And then we basically tell Subdivision to fill in the rest. And you can see it's doing that perfectly. But it's also giving us these parts that are super, that used to be super sharp. Now they're even smoother than this part. So what's going on? So I guess that brings us to the next part of the presentation. Yeah, let's go back to where we left off. And yeah, basically now when it comes down to this sharpening, so we have two techniques that we can use. We can use the one that's called edge creasing, and we can also use edge beveling. And edge beveling is basically the most kind of bare bones. It's not exactly a feature that, you know, software might have. Any software that basically has subdivision surface and doesn't have like the edge creasing, you can basically achieve sharpness by adding more geometry. As you can see by the wireframe, you know, it gets really dense over here. And that is, you know, you're beveling the edges, and then you're kind of, yeah, it's kind of just, you know, you're doing edge beveling, and because you're creating more geometry around that area, Subdivision Surface is going to look at that and is going to take that geometry into account and smooth between that geometry that is like super tight over there in the corners, therefore achieving this sharpness. And you can also use edge creasing, and this is also, with edge creasing you can get that 100% sharpness back when using Subdivision Surfaces when it's necessary. So yeah, and yeah, I guess this is yeah, that slide is what we're going to be talking about next. But now, so how do we do that in Blender basically. So first of all, you can, of course, you can use Control B like I already showed you before. So we can, I guess, select these ones. Or I guess we're going to select all the edges, and I'm holding Shift once again to select multiple edges. And so right now, I'm going to press Control B, and you can see. So I'm going to decrease this, but yeah, basically I'm doing an edge bevel, and I'm adding more geometry into these edges, and you can see Subdivision is now taking that into account, and now we're getting this beautiful smooth surface. I'm going to press Control Z a couple of times because I want to show you how the other technique, which is edge creasing, works. So I'm going to pull out this panel, and I believe you should be able to. So this is called an end panel. So this one on the left is called tool panel, and you can toggle it on and off using the T key. And same way with this end panel, which is the panel on the right. And it has these 3 tabs. For now, we're going to be using the item tab. And basically for the edges that you have selected, it has this edges data section, and you can basically increase this mean crease slider. And as you can see, as you do it, the more you do it, the sharper the edge becomes. And this is, you know, like a procedural way to add sharpness, of course. And as you can see, since we increased it to 1, it has it created that 100% sharpness again. Yeah, basically, if we increase a few more subdivision levels. By the way, be very careful when you're increasing subdivision levels, because every subdivision level will multiply your geometry count by 4, and so you can very quickly, you know, basically your geometry count will grow exponentially. So don't just go dragging it like this. You can see that doesn't even allow you to drag it more than 6 initially, you know, but if this was a dense mesh, it would kind of go crazy. So I'm going to set this to 3, or actually to 4 maybe. And as you can see, as I decrease this edge crease, you know, since I don't want this to be 100% sharp, I can decrease it to something like 0.9. And now we're kind of getting this result. And we can probably, and you know, if there is still something that's, that it's not smoothing quite well enough, you can increase the subdivision level once more, and then proceed to, you know, maybe increase the sharpness even more until you get the result that you want. But yeah, so this is how you sharpen them back up. And basically, this is kind of, I hope you can see where I'm going with this, where if you want to do organic modeling, where you're not really dependent on these super rigid primitives, you can just go crazy with it. And yeah, I guess this could be a good time for me to introduce you to the Extrude Tool. And the Extrude Tool, you can launch it with the shortcut E. And then it kind of allows you to now drag around this these polygons, and you can start just playing with it, kind of like this. And as you can see, this seems kind of too crazy and seems like it doesn't have too much control. But you know, we'll discuss some, I guess, you know, actual production ready techniques once we get into it. But yeah, as you can see, this is probably something that you can do with CAD, you know, even if you can, not very easily, because the freedom of using polygon modeling is that they're just so elastic. You can just bend them how you want. You can just move them around. You're not really set with this with these kind of primitives and cutting into shapes and merging them together. You can just kind of go crazy with it. So and with Subdivision, it's going to give you these smooth surfaces. And yeah, so we can turn the Subdivision on and off. So this is the mesh that we're actually working with. And when we turn on subdivision, it kind of smooths everything. And by the way, this mesh that that is kind of semi-transparent, as you can see. So that is our original mesh, of course, and that is the one that I called the low poly cage previously, just to clear that up, if somebody didn't pick up on that. Yeah, let's go back to the presentation now, and let's go to this. So now I mentioned artifacts that subdivision surfaces produce. And the artifacts, and basically now we didn't actually see any artifacts because we did everything kind of the correct way. But you have 3 polygon types in Blender, or 3ds Max for that matter, and any software like it, which is you have the triangles, you have quads, and you have n-gons. And basically, this animation down here is a demonstration how these kind of surfaces are actually, you know, subdivided. And you can see that you know, quads, they subdivide very cleanly. It's almost, you can, if your model is made out of quad polygons, you can almost expect, you know, how it's going to smooth. It's going to just create more quads, and it's going to smooth them very nicely. However, if it's triangles, you know, subdivision doesn't really know what to do with it, and it's going to start to create these weird patterns. And you know, I don't have shading on these animations. It's all this solid white color on the surface. But if we actually start lighting this and we remove the wireframe, you'll be able to see kind of, you know, instead of how quads, it kind of creates this very nice bevel around it that's very smooth. You know, with like with triangles, for example, it's going to create this, you know, this point that kind of connects with these other points, and you'll be able to see like that, like a weird little pinch on the curve there, and that's gonna kind of ruin the illusion and make your model look kind of like it's cheaply modeled, which is you know, if you've seen those amateur, like really low quality renders, I guess, somewhere on the internet, usually that's because, you know, they've used subdivision and they didn't pay attention to polygon types. And the reason this can get difficult sometimes is because you don't always have the luxury of having your model 100% quads. Sometimes it can be just mathematically impossible, or just so difficult and just not worth the effort to create everything into quads. So sometimes you might end up with a triangle on your geometry. But yeah, so I guess so. What's next? Okay, so we are actually done with the with this presentation part, and now we can get into the actual modeling. So yeah, so if I try to create a triangle right now, so I can do this. So there are, of course, there are a million ways to do it inside of Blender. I'm gonna press K and use the cut tool, and I'm gonna click on these 2 vertices, and as you can see, I split this polygon into and the squad into 2 triangles. So as you can see, there's a little pinch that appeared here. And if we were to look at the wireframe, so I'm going to turn on wireframe again. 1 second. So it's going to be wireframe. You can see it kind of, instead of being like this super smooth and nice surface, it kind of created this it didn't really know how to smooth it properly, so you know, it created this point, and then point in the middle. So because the way triangles are actually subdivided is, once they are subdivided, they actually become quads. But you know, in the as a result of that, it also you know, kind of basically broke the pattern this really nice quad pattern, and I created this this kind of pinch that or like extra geometry that didn't smooth very nicely. So that's something to keep in mind, and we can also kind of jump into ways we can avoid that. So now, I also, so of course I have some ideas of things we can model in this workshop, but I'd like to encourage people to also maybe, if you've seen something like very organic that you want to model, then please share it in the chat so that we can maybe, because you may have some ideas, some organic building, organic shape that you want to model, and it would be very useful, if we can just go straight to the problem instead of like looking at something random on the internet, and maybe help with your problem directly, because also everybody has questions, right? Even though I'm kind of mentioning all these tools, when you actually get into it and start to model things, you're gonna run into different kind of issues and challenges. So you can kind of use this opportunity to maybe clear that up. So I guess I'll be waiting for answers in the chat. Meanwhile, I'm gonna also maybe find an example that we can model, and if not, then we'll come up with something. So yeah. Okay, so I just did this Google search of just organic building, and this is what Google gave me. And this is a good example of what we can get into. And I guess we'll first get into how we can model surfaces like these, where it's super organic and looks super freeform and natural. And later, I guess we can also look at some things. Maybe I can find an example here. Yeah, we can also look at different ways how Blender can allow us very quickly to create things like these. Maybe maybe we want to generate a bunch of windows here. Stuff like this can also be very cool. We can take a look at how to model stuff like this, and yeah. This is also something we can look at. Interesting shapes here. So, but I think we're gonna pick this one because this one seems. Of course, we're not gonna model the whole building because that would take just way too long, especially when I'm trying to explain things instead of just working. But yeah. Now I'm gonna, I guess we can get into some practical tips and techniques, how to model something like this. So now, I guess we're gonna start over. So since the kind of demo part is over, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back into object mode, what I just did, and I'm gonna press, and I just press the delete key. But I believe you can also press X and it gives you this delete drop down, and you can select and delete your mesh. And now we have these two objects. We have camera and we have the light. I guess we can get rid of those two since they won't be necessary. So now, how do you add a new object? So, before we start modifying things and start modeling, we first need to create something as a base. So, and we can do that by pressing Shift A, and it brings up this add menu. And now you can try maybe, so let's say we can add a cylinder, and it also gives us these options right here. So before you click away and start using other tools, this kind of tool is still sort of active before clicking away, right? And if you, so this panel right here at the lower left corner, it's called a redo panel, and you can change the amount of vertices and kind of make it smoother or not as smooth by default. If you're working with subdivision surfaces and if you're not going to just leave this as is, then I probably recommend to actually lower this to something like 16 or 8, because one mistake that beginners usually make in these types of programs is that they create something that is too dense by default. You have this fear that you won't have enough geometry, so you're like, oh sure, why not, I'm just going to add more geometry at the start. But that's not actually the correct way to do it most of the time. There's a time and place for it, especially when you're not using subdivision surfaces. But if you are using subdivision surfaces, then the problem that you're going to introduce is that you'll have so much geometry that it's going to be hard to work with. So you want to choose something that's lightweight and that kind of allows you an easy workflow, and then you can add in a subdivision surface later, and that's going to take care of the smoothing. So yeah. So for now, actually, so cylinder wouldn't be a bad start for now, actually. So if we're by the way, so we're looking at this architecture. So, and by cylinder, I mean if we rotate it kind of 90 degrees, then we can kind of use this as a base. We have this curve, but this shape is so organic, to be honest, that it doesn't really matter what we start from. So yeah, so I guess we'll actually start with a plane. So now, maybe actually what we're gonna do. I'm gonna show you another thing that Blender offers. Maybe you've actually done this by accident, and this is kind of a user interface feature that Blender has. It is when you need an additional tab, there is this kind of or it's not an icon, but when you're hovering above a corner, you can see my cursor turns into this crosshair icon, and if we click and drag to the left, you can see that it brings out another tab. And basically, if we want to merge this back, and this might take some practice, because what sometimes happens is, especially when you're just starting to work with Blender, you want to close one tab and you kind of drag out another tab by accident. Yeah, right now I guess I have too much experience because I'm not running into this problem. But what might happen is kind of this, and you try to basically, yeah, if you're, oh, see, now I'm running into this problem. But when you're dragging to the right, I think this will allow you to kind of merge these tabs together. But we want to split this 3D viewport into another tab, and please do go away. It's kind of getting in the way. Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna open the image editor, I guess. Yeah, it should be image editor. So, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just screenshot this, as you can see, and don't think he actually screenshotted. Maybe it did. Nope. Oh yeah, I don't actually have the screenshot. I can just download this image right off the bat. And what I'm gonna do is well, yeah, I'm gonna try to open this image inside of Blender. So I'm gonna press open. I'm gonna navigate to my desktop where I saved it, and I'm gonna open this organic architecture image. And now we have this other tab just sitting right next to us. And this is very useful, to maybe if you want to, instead of having like a Windows like a Windows program open, maybe a web browser where you're looking at reference, when you click on Blender, it disappears. You can just kind of have it inside of this single user interface, which is really nice. So yeah, let's do that. So I'm gonna delete this. So once again, I'm gonna press Shift A and I'm gonna add a plane. So now I guess what we're gonna do is we're gonna start kind of at this top part, and yeah, kind of we're gonna try to kind of create this roof, I guess, or it's this this organic form, I guess. So yeah. Now I'm going to bring this up a little bit, and you can mesh this with real world scale. After all, Blender has this measure tool, and you can kind of measure things like this roughly. However, if you want it to be specifically in like some sort of axis, then I recommend. So I'm pressing this tilde key on my keyboard, which is the key above the tab key, and yeah, it kind of, when you hold it, it opens up this menu which allows you to snap to different kind of orthographic views. And if you kind of want to measure it something, like a height of something, then I recommend you do that inside the 3D, or no, instead of the 3D view, you use one of the orthographic views instead of the like 3D perspective view. So you can see now we're at 2 meters. It's obviously way too small, but we're not going to worry about that right now because we can rescale the model at whichever point we like. So we just are going to focus on making this shape. So now we have done everything inside of object mode, and we can move inside the edit mode. So now we're inside of polygon mode. I'm going to switch to edge mode right now, and I'm going to select this edge. And now, so in my mind, I'm kind of right over here, and I'm going to start extruding this edge down and around, and yeah, basically start working on this shape in general. So now, what we're going to do is I'm going to press E, and E is the shortcut for extrude, and you can see it's kind of extruding like this. However, it might look like we're extruding in kind of one direction, but or like it looks like we're extruding along this Z and Y plane. However, that's not the case. If we were to rotate around, you can see that this edge is not exactly straight. So how do we limit our extrude tool to kind of use only those kind of move? How do we limit our extrude tool so that it moves along only one plane and not all these three? So there are a couple ways we can do this. So first of all, I'm gonna delete this polygon. So I'm gonna press X and delete faces. And next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into edge mode, select this edge again, press E on the keyboard so that the extrude tool launches. And so now so how do we limit it to a single axis or a single plane? So now so you can actually press keys on your keyboard, kind of like, for example, the X key. So you can type like the axis that you want to limit it to on your keyboard. So if I type in X, you can see it only moves in the X axis. You can see it kind of added this red line to kind of indicate, which axis is the tool is constrained to. Or you can press Y, and now it's only constrained to the Y axis. Now you can also constrain it to Z. So it's going to basically, you can't really see it from here, but it's only going upwards and downwards. Yeah. Oh, Mati's joined. Some friendly faces over there. I believe the only person with a camera. So yeah.
Like saying,
Matis is usually a very interactive person in the meetup, so maybe we'll get some input from him. So yeah, Matis is not too advanced with modeling, so yeah, he's gonna have some questions. But yeah, we're kind of introducing you know, this people to organic modeling. And so if you can see on my screen, Mati, we have this building that we're trying to model. And of course, we're not going to model all of it, but you know, hopefully, you know, this is a pretty good example because it's not too difficult. It's you know, it's like, and it looks interesting enough. So yeah, so yeah, basically, what we're going to do now next is I want to create this curvature that's going around, and for that, I'm going to press Control R, and I'm going to add a couple more edges here. I honestly, I think 2 would be enough, but we're going to add 3 edges just to give us some extra control, and it also allows us to slide. We're just going to right-click because we don't want that. We want our edges to be directly in the middle. And now, of course, you know, we are choosing a low amount of edges because we want Subdivision to do the heavy lifting. And while we just kind of block in what we want, how we want the curvature to look like. And I'm gonna add the Subdivision Surface now. You can see it smooths everything nicely, and it's also smoothing the corners, but you know, that's fine in this case because as we start creating more geometry here, you know, that that is going to disappear kind of. So yeah, so now let's start working on this shape. So yeah, so I guess, so you can see it kind of goes down here. So we're not going to really model the stairs right now. That's kind of a problem for later. But if we press E again, and then we constrain it to the Y-axis, now you can see we're creating some, we kind of, yeah, I mean, I guess you can see that. I don't really need to explain that. So yeah, so now you can see, now it's kind of like a wave going around. So if we select this edge, press extrude again, and oh, 1 second, I'm gonna press Control Z. I'm gonna press E again, constrain it to the Y-axis. By the way, another thing you can do, I'm going to delete this polygon really quick. If you don't want to use the move tool at all, you can press E, and then you can, when it starts doing the move operation, you can just right click. And then, so what happened right now is it applied the extrude operation, but it didn't apply the move operation. And if you have the move tool selected manually, you can kind of use the kind of on-screen controls to move the geometry around. So yeah, that's about it. So, and you can see that kind of this part is leaning over, you know, it's not exactly on the same plane like, or maybe it is, I don't know, or it kind of looks like it is. Yeah, it's maybe too hard to tell from this angle. It does look like it's leaning a little bit outwards here, but it kind of, yeah, maybe it's just a twist, and that's why it kind of looks that way. But okay, I guess to keep it simple, we'll keep it on the same plane, kind of this edge right here. And yeah, so as you can see, this this roundness right here is sort of a lot more sharp. So we're gonna move this edge backwards a little bit, maybe move it up, and now you can see it's going around kind of like that. And then I'm just going to keep going. Another thing you can do is actually, so what if you wanted to constrain it to 2 axes at the same time? So basically, you would be, in that case, I think, so if you hold Shift and press Z, for example, you're kind of saying which axis to exclude. And this is not the right axis that we want to exclude. We want to exclude the X-axis. So if you press Shift X, now we're moving at, you know, on the Z and Y plane. So that's one way to do it. Or also another thing that you can do is you press the tilde key and hold it and go into something, one of these views, maybe like the right view. And now you can, and now any extrude operation that you do in an orthographic view is gonna, it's gonna happen in those two axes. It's not gonna use the third axis. And I'm gonna, by the way, yeah, you can also select multiple selections. So I'm gonna select box, and maybe go to vertex mode and go into, press this icon and kind of move things around. Oh yeah, it doesn't select through. That's one thing. Yeah, but if you wanted to select through, so you can see it then select, you know, the vertex or the edge, you know, behind this vertex. If you want to do that, you can turn on this X-ray mode, and that's going to allow you to select through. So we can kind of do this. Also, if you want to use the move tool, you can also press G, and that's going to basically be the same kind of gizmo-less move tool that kind of comes with the extrude tool. So yes, so I'm gonna select this, and I'm gonna press G and kind of move these things around. And actually, it looks like they're not on the same plane. I kind of moved them, so I'm gonna select these two vertices, and I'm gonna press the scale tool, and I'm gonna scale them to the middle. And while I'm kind of scaling them in this axis, I can press 0 on my numpad, and that's going to kind of set it to 0 scale in the y-axis. So I'm going to go back into the right view, and I'm going to use my I have the X-ray mode on so that I can select through. I'm going to select this select box tool. And now I'm going to kind of try to match up the shape. And I'm going to use the G key to do that. And I think in this case, what would be your more useful, so that we don't have to do the kind of extrusions a million times, we can press Control R. With scroll wheel, increase the segments. And yeah, we don't want the slide operation, so right click on that and go to the right view and select box and basically do this. Just use the G key and move things around like kind of like this. So yeah. So, and yeah, if you want to kind of pan around like this, you can hold Shift and middle mouse. That's going to allow you to pan around without kind of going through the view. Or you can use this icon right here if you're not the mouse and keyboard type guy. So something like this. We don't have to get this super accurate, by the way. But you know, some of you are probably perfectionists. Nobody can stop you, really. I can kind of consider myself to be a perfectionist as well. I have to fight that on the daily. So yeah, so I guess next thing we're gonna do is I guess we can kind of finish the last part using the extrude tool. So as you can see, I kind of made sure that this edge is selected, and then because you can't really see, as you can see, if we're in the right view, it's hard to tell, you know, what we have selected. because the edge is kind of parallel to the axis we're kind of viewing. Yeah, and it kind of goes around like that, and I think that's going to be good enough. So yeah, so now we just created this very organic looking shape, and so what is the next step? So yeah, so first of all, one, I guess, big difference is that you can see this shape over here. It doesn't stay like that. It kind of goes up like this. So, and if we wanna recreate the same thing, I guess first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back into edit mode, and now I want to actually select this whole like edge loop that's going around. So, and we can do that because it would be kind of annoying selecting it one by one. So you can hold Alt and you can press once, and that's going to select an edge loop. So that's a very quick way to select edge loops. Go to the Move tool, move this to the left, and now we can, start creating this curvature right here. So basically, so another tool that will come in handy is going to be this. Okay, so I'm going to need to move this away real quick. Yeah, so if I click on one edge, so we have quite a bit of edges right here, and Subdivision is doing a great job at helping us smooth things. But you can see as I pull one edge up, everything stays in the same place, and that's kind of annoying. But one way we can avoid this is by perhaps using the proportional editing. So let's click on that. And as I start dragging, you might feel that not much is really happening. But actually, when you scroll the mouse wheel, you can see that it's increasing this kind of it's increasing this circle that is basically the fall off of this proportional editing feature. And you can see it kind of did by default, it already did a much better job than we did by doing everything manually. So we can kind of bring this thing up, and you can see it caught this area right here. So how do we avoid that? What happens if we want to kind of move something, but something is in the way? So what we're going to do right now, I guess, is I'm going to select the polygons that got caught, and I'm using Shift to do that. I'm holding Shift and selecting, and I'm going to press the H key. So this hides the polygons, and now they shouldn't be affected when we actually do the this proportional editing thingy. So, and now, so we're going to move this up, and then I'm going to move this down a little bit, although I'm going to decrease the area, kind of like that. A little perfection thing for you there. And then I believe you have to press Alt-H to unhide, and you can see this polygon kind of stayed in place. It didn't move. So, and this is what we wanted. That's great. And one other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to press Alt and press Select once again. And then I'm going to use the Extrude tool, constrain it to X-axis, and kind of extrude this away over here. Also, this kind of curve is a lot tighter. So I'm going to do is I'm going to press Alt again, select this, and also let's turn off proportional editing. We don't want this right now. I'm going to move this over here. And what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to turn off wireframe real quick. And also X-ray, yeah. I'm going to turn off wireframe, and I'll also increase the subdivision level to 2. And I'm going to shade smooth. So yeah, you can see there's a little pinch over here. And that's because we have the pinch is being caused by this edge. And in this case, we can just dissolve it. So I'm going to press either delete or X, and this brings up this menu, and then I can say dissolve edges. And it did just that. And you can see, and that's why using tons of geometry when you're working with subdivision surfaces is not recommended, because it's going to create, when you start moving stuff around, you're going to break the smoothness. You want smoothness to be kind of taken care of by subdivision surface. So now, once again, Alt and left click on the edge loop. I'm gonna move this in a little bit, and I'm gonna do Control R and add another edge loop right here. Slide it around, and now I'm gonna turn the proportional editing back on. And it's hard to see, by the way. So what do we do when we have this? When the geometry created by the subdivision surface overlaps our cage mesh. So we can actually go and click on this on cage icon. So if we press that, then it disables our subdivision our low poly cage for a while, so that we can just take a look at the subdivision result, and we can maybe move this up a little bit. Or let's go into vertex mode and start moving this manually. I'm going to turn off the proportional editing to not distort the shape. As you can see, the vertices are quite close, so we don't want to distort that shape. And I'm just going to move things around. If our geometry is not dense enough, then we're not going to have smoothing problems. So maybe we can even move this forward a little bit. Just make sure to not break the smoothness too much. But at the same time, it's your design, so go crazy with it. So you can see, very quickly, we're kind of coming up with this shape that's looking close to what we have here. It's looking a little sharp.
I think you have a question from Toivo. Maybe you already answered it.
Oh no, I'm not actually really reading the chat too much.
About the subdivision surfaces, where to enable them.
Oh, okay, yeah. So one person can find the subdivision surface. Yeah, if anybody else cannot find subdivision surface, it's under. So when you let's go back. I'm gonna show this on a different mesh. We have the measuring tool on for some reason. So right now, so if I press Shift A and add a new mesh like a cube maybe. And then I'm gonna drag this out. When you click, you want to make sure that you're in object mode and that you click on the cube or whatever your mesh you want to apply the subdivision modifier to, and you want to go to this wrench icon. It says Modifier Properties. You want to press on Add Modifier, Subdivision Surface, and there you go. Now you have the subdivision surface enabled, basically, and then you can go into edit mode and do whatever you like. So I hope that answered your question. If not, maybe somebody can type in the chat, like click on the wrench icon or something like that. So yeah, that's about that.
Please, really, if there are other questions, if you have, feel free to interrupt directly.
Oh yeah. Actually,
I want to know what is how you're following.
Yeah, that's very important. I actually didn't know this. There were so many like things going on in the chat. I have it open right now. So yeah. So let's see where we left off. So yeah. I think that was the only one so far. Yeah, about the subdivision surface. Yeah, please feel free to ask questions. That's kind of what it's all about. I've hosted a few of these meetups, or maybe more than a few, like over 20. And usually, talking from experience, especially beginners with, with Blender, specifically, people always run into their own like unique issues, and like there's just so much to cover. So I don't even, honestly, when I'm hosting these meetups, I'm not even paying attention to, I'm not even mentioning like how to, I'm not even telling people how not to make them mistakes, because there would be so much to cover that you can't possibly absorb everything. And so I usually let people make the mistakes themselves, and then we kind of solve it together, because that's the best way to learn. Because usually when I try to explain, how not to make the mistakes, usually there's just so much to remember that either people just don't catch that, or just, they still run into this the same issues, and it's just a lot. Blender is a big program, so and I'm pretty sure some of you will run into mistakes. And by the way, if you haven't, then you must be a really good student, because from our experience, things usually go pretty crazy. So meanwhile, I'm just gonna keep kind of working on this shape and calling out, what buttons I'm pressing, I guess. So I'm gonna turn on proportional editing again and start modifying this shape and get it less straight and more organic, maybe. So yeah. So Alt-click to select a loop. And now, so I want to get this. So now we kind of got this part right, but now, as you can see on the side, there's like this kind of wave that's coming up. So we're going to try to model that. So Control R, add a few more segments. Maybe we can move them around a little bit this time with the slide tool. And yeah, let's go into the polygon mode and yeah, bump this up. And maybe now go over here with the proportional editing enabled. Let's extrude this up and look at that. I mean, of course, there are kind of these little creases. If you wanted to get these creases, I guess there's a quick way to do it. You can try to, yeah, I'm gonna try to get the shape a little bit more accurate. 1 second. Okay, so now so you can see there are these little creases over here. We're gonna need to add a bit more geometry for that. So I'm gonna add 2 edge loops. And I guess so of course, this is not enough geometry to create those creases. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select Shift select, or you have to hold Shift and Alt, and select both of these edge loops, and we want to bevel them. So and you want to press Control B, and now as you can see, so with a scroll wheel, you want to make sure that each bevel has like has 2 segments. So you can see here, and now if we want to create those creases, I'm gonna hold Shift and Alt, select both of those edge loops, and then I'm gonna do this kind of, what is it? Kind of, I'm looking for the shrink fatten, maybe push and pull. Let's see, shrink fatten, what does it do? Oh yeah, we have to turn off proportional editing. Yeah, so we're gonna do this, and you can see we kind of created a little bit of those creases. So yeah, and of course you can see that they kind of fade in. And honestly, if you wanted to do that, You just need to deselect before you do that operation. So I'm gonna grab my select box, and if we hold Control, we can deselect things while keeping the other selection kind of enabled. And now we're gonna go back to the push and pull, grab the handle, push it out, and now we have our creases. And if we want to make this even more sharp, we can add the mean crease. So yeah, now we have these little sharp creases, and you can see like already we're, you know, not too bad for, I guess, for this whatever time we've been modeling. So so yeah, and of course, you know, we have a little bit of like these, there's like a little bit of a pinch here. You know, if that's too big of a problem, you can, I guess you can probably just like the simplest possible solution would be to click on it, press X, and dissolve the edges. And yeah, so also we can also look at a few modifiers. Maybe there's this Smooth Modifier, which kind of smooths things out. You can increase the smooth factor. Yeah, I'm not sure what's doing there, but as you can see, like basically takes your geometry and kind of smooths it. Oh, I'm not sure what's going on here. I think you have to keep the factor at like 0.5 for the best results. And if you want it to be smoother, you just increase the iterations, and maybe increase the factor and kind of get the result with the combination of those two. And so yeah, if we turn it on and off, you can see we got rid of that that bit of kind of that lack of smoothness. And you can actually apply the Smooth Modifier, or yeah, actually this is too much. So the reason why we got this result is because you know, when we pressed apply, it applied the Smooth Modifier to our low poly cage mesh, but it didn't apply it to or like, but right now it's being applied to our subdivision mesh. So there's going to be a little bit of a difference. Maybe we can put the Smooth Modifier before, you know, before subdivision, and you can see like the order is very important. So first our mesh is being smoothed by the Smooth Modifier, and then it's being subdivided. So it's going to give a different result. So you can also, when you're dragging these sliders, you can hold Shift, drag them around like that. We don't need that many iterations. I think we're going to be fine with 2. And now we got rid of that that bit that wasn't so smooth. So yeah, now we have this building. So okay, so I guess we have modeled this thing, right? Now how do we get some thickness in here? So we can actually look at some other modifiers that Blender offers. And if we want to work with modifiers that are sort of, you know, part of or that's gonna like create more geometry, you know, there are these tabs basically, and these are basically the most popular ones, the deform and generate. And so you can add the Solidify Modifier, and that comes in the end. And when you increase the thickness, you can see that you know, it created some thickness basically, and also so it's already shaded smooth. However, if we wanted to keep the sharp edges sharp, we want to go into Object Data Properties, and under Normals, you press Auto Smooth, and boom, you have this. So yeah, I guess now would probably be a good time to take a 15-minute break. This was a lot to absorb, and then we'll come back and we'll look at some other interesting ways. So now that you're a bit more familiar with Blender, now I guess we can look at some other ways we can create interesting shapes. And this is more about organic modeling. And now we'll be looking into, also, I guess I'll show you a little bit of sculpting tools as well for easier time creating these really, really organic shapes, as well as, procedural modeling and how that works. And we got a little bit of a taste of how procedural modeling works. So basically the modifier stack, that's our procedural part. So you can see we can turn all this stuff off, and we are still, this is by the way how our low poly cage mesh looks like. Pretty ugly, but as you can see, with the help of these modifiers, we were able to get this the super smooth result that just looks nice. So yeah. Okay, so I guess see you in 15 minutes. So yeah, now we're back. We have this scene right here that we built so far. So right now, I kind of showed you an introduction of how to use, how to model geometry in combination with some modifiers and get results that way. But if you would be using only that side of Blender, you would be pretty much missing out, because Blender has so much more to offer that can help you create these super organic results. And before we get into the other crazy stuff, I'd like to show you a little bit of sculpting tools and how that can help. So if you are kind of not very good at, this, just moving points around and polygons around, what you can do also is use the sculpting tools, which is basically allows you to use a brush to kind of instead of using this triple axis gizmo and moving points around, you'll just be able to use a brush and move points around and kind of more naturally, almost like if you're smearing them through the screen. And usually sculpting is of course a specialty that people specialize in. If you're good at drawing, you're probably going to be good at sculpting as well, but I imagine that most of us are not good at drawing. While if you wanted to become like a really good sculptor, that would kind of you would need to spend a lot of time practicing it, and usually that's why people avoid sculpting, is that it's so it's so kind of it requires a lot of skill. It's kind of like drawing in a way. However, it doesn't mean that you can't make it work for you. So in the kind of, if we're using the drawing analogy, you don't have to be a professional, you don't have to be like an award-winning, super talented artist, that does drawings. You can just use the pencil to write something down or do some sketches, and this is kind of what we're trying to do here. And basically you can see if we click on the object mode drop down. By the way, before I do this, I'm going to duplicate this mesh so that we can have a copy of this. And you can do this using, I believe, Shift D. And you can see it duplicates our mesh. And now we can move it around. Make sure to not click away right away. I'm going to press the Y key, and that's going to constrain this to the Y axis. So now I'm going to move this out of the way. And so we have basically a copy of our mesh. That's basically this. That's gonna be our backup basically. So if we screw something up here, then we can kind of go back. So now what I'm gonna do is Usually, sculpting tools work better if you have lots of geometry. And if we turn off our modifiers, you can see that this is basically our geometry. It's not very high res, so I think it's better if we apply a few modifiers. So I'm going to apply our Smooth Modifier. So you click on this drop down and also this Subdivision Modifier, right? So each modifier will have this drop down next to these 4 icons, and it's going to allow you to apply it. And what apply does is basically everything. It's basically kind of saying, you know, this, I don't want the, I no longer want this modifier to keep kind of recalculating and working. Just take the last result that the modifier gave and apply it to the geometry. So if we go into our edit mode, you can see that instead of having this, you know, compared to this one, this low resolution mesh, we have now this, you know, this super dense mesh. And now we can do like different kinds of operations on this, you know, and of course, nothing's stopping you from actually sculpting on this mesh. However, I don't think there's enough geometry to, or in this case, you know, it wouldn't be super intuitive to start drawing like very fine detail on this. So in this case, this mesh will just work, you know, just fine. However, you know, I think it will be easier to demonstrate on this very dense mesh. So I'm going to go into the Sculpt mode. So now, first thing we probably want to turn off, and on my screen is probably not visible because I've increased the scaling on my screen so that everybody can see what I'm doing. You want to make sure that the symmetry is off, you know, especially if your model is not symmetrical. If you're maybe doing a face, then you want to enable symmetry on. But yeah, just make sure it's off so that you don't get any weird behavior. And now you can see we have this kind of brush that is you know, appearing on our geometry, and we can maybe turn off this Solidify Modifier for now, so that we so Solidify Modifier is the modifier that gives us thickness. We can actually rename it. So you know, if you want to rename this to like thickness or something, you can do that. I'm going to leave this as Solidify, but yeah, so, and if we press the left mouse button, we can actually start drawing on our mesh. So, and this is basically, you know, if you wanted to get some really crazy stuff, you know, maybe you can increase the brush really large, because, you know, you probably don't want to create like these very, very small indents, you know, that's going to kind of break the smoothness of your mesh, you know, especially if it's something like an architecture building, you want it to look like really nice from far away, not like a super detailed mesh, right? So and yeah, and we can even make this more organic this way, kind of, as you can see, kind of experimenting with shapes. If you hold control, that's going to do the opposite. That's going to, you know, that's going to kind of fold it in instead of out. And you can also hold Shift and then kind of move your mouse over it by holding Shift. And what the Shift key does is a modifier for a smooth key. So when you're holding Shift, it's going to smooth your geometry. So you can see now, instead of having this basic shape, we can very quickly get, you know, some roundness going on and some crazy looking stuff. So yeah, and if we wanted to also smooth out these kind of creases, we can do that just using the smooth key. And this is basically, you know, like I said before, as you can see, when we created these kind of these creases, you know, sometimes we get into a situation where they go further than we want to, and if we want to smoothly fade them out, we can just go into the sculpt mode and just fade them out like that, and that can work too. So, and there are also some other tools like you know, mostly these other brushes, they're, you know, maybe made for increasing detail, or, you know, just some complex character modeling. Flatten brush is very interesting, I guess, if you wanted to create something that's maybe kind of round, but has some flatness to it, you know, like kind of this organic flatness. You can try to do that as well. So flatness brush can be really interesting. As you can see, yeah, you know, we created now this very interesting shape. Maybe to visualize it even better, what Blender allows you to do is change the viewport chaining mode to matte cap, and you can choose between different matte caps. So you know, that can help you show the shape better. And you can also do is click down here into this drop down and maybe add a cavity, and maybe play with this, maybe set the type to both, and maybe play around with this ridge and valley settings. And this can enhance the basically enhance the curves and the shapes. As you can see, these creases that were looking, you know, they were looking sharp before, but now they're looking even sharper. And this is because the sharper kind of the angle is, the whiter it's going to get. So you can kind of play around with that. So yeah, and you can basically do stuff like this, and you know, your model that was already organic, you're making it even more organic and even more interesting. So yeah, it wouldn't be very easy to get this shape, you know, by using these tools right here. However, with sculpting tools, we can see that we can go pretty crazy and get a bunch of different results quickly. And also, I guess another brush besides flatten that I want to show is the grab brush, which is it's sort of similar to the brush that we used before, but it's not really the same. You're not drawing onto your mesh. You're kind of, it's kind of like a very soft fall off. It's like you take a point and you know, it's kind of like proportional editing in a way. We can just drag things around on the screen, and any point that's in the radius will kind of follow with this very smooth fall off. You know, you can kind of use it to enhance some shapes, move things around. So that's great. So yeah, I guess that pretty much wraps up the sculpting tools. Now let's look at, oh yeah, this is pretty dangerous, right? Don't do what I did. Save your project. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna call this just organic modeling. That's gonna be our project title for now. But yeah, so don't forget to save your projects. If you work on something for hours and then your computer crashes, it's gonna be pretty devastating. So yeah, let's move on now on to
Eliass,
huh?
can I ask you a quick question about the sculpting tools?
Yeah, sure.
Basically, every time I try to use them, I kind of love the results I am arriving at, but even with Smooth, if I drag the elements too far, they kind of get very blocky. Like I can actually share the screen and show, like, there are some ridge lines appearing. Do you have any solution for that? Because it kind of messes with the freedom. If you look here, you can see that it starts to get really, like, it kind of loses its resolution the farther it goes from the base geometry I started with.
Yeah. So there can be a couple solutions for that. So I'm gonna share my screen once again. Okay. So let's kind of use the example that Matis had, where we're just using a plane. I'm gonna increase the size of it, and then I'm gonna subdivide the hell out of it. So I'm gonna go into edit mode. I'm gonna press subdivide. So this subdivide feature, this is on the right click. So this is gonna subdivide your mesh without smoothing it. So this can be pretty useful if it's a plane and you need to, like, quickly add a bunch of subdivisions to it. You don't have to add the subdivision modifier. So now
I actually did that in the beginning, yeah. But
yeah,
then afterwards, I don't know.
Yeah, this is very useful for that reason. So yeah, now let's grab kind of the grab brush, and you can see, you can already see some blockiness. Now, in this case, it's because our mesh, you know, we can easily avoid this by just setting it to smooth. But even if we shade it smooth, and we grab the sculpting brushes and start to kind of really push it, you know, like you can see we are starting to introduce some blockiness. So let's take a look at what's happening behind the scenes. So let's go with, so I want to enable wireframe, right? So as you can see, the problem is happening because initially we have this, you know, very dense geometry, and it's allowing us to create these nice, nice and round features. However, as you know, it's still, you know, the geometry is still finite. So what happens is when you start to drag things around too much, you know, it's like a rubber band. There is so many atoms in the rubber band, you can't stretch it forever. So it starts to, you know, lose detail. So solutions, so there are a couple of solutions for this. So the most, I guess, basic one, or the one that you might be already tempted to do, which is also a fine one, you can just add the subdivision surface, and this is going to treat your subdivided mesh just like another locally caged mesh and create that those extra subdivisions. But you know, you would also be running into a problem where if we turn off optimal display, is that, you know, imagine if you were dragging this even further. So I'm going to take Sculpt Mode. I'm going to drag this even further so that the polygons get even more and more stretched. So first of all, by the way, you know, it starts to kind of break apart a little bit. You know, now we're getting spikes instead of smooth hill because there's just so little detail if we drag it around so far. But the thing is, we'd have to add more and more detail to kind of, you know, basically detail up here, just so you get smooth detail up here. The detail down here would need to be like so unnecessarily high. This is just wasted geometry. So let's kind of move down a little bit. And I'm gonna just push things around even more. I use the smooth brush, yeah, so let's try to recreate this problem again. So yeah, so now we're lacking some detail. What's another thing that we can use to solve this? So Blender has a feature called Dynamesh. Or no, it's actually Dyn Topo. I believe Dynamesh is something from ZBrush. So yeah, ZBrush is a specialized sculpting software, but Dyn Topo, this is kind of like a copycat feature from ZBrush, which I'm very thankful for, by the way, because it's a very useful feature. So Dyn Topo, when you enable it, it's gonna do it's gonna actually kind of, as you are extruding and like moving geometry around, it's gonna it will help, and it will kind of create more geometry as you move it. So it will always keep dynamically generating and regenerating geometry on the fly as you're dragging things around. So you will always have enough geometry to, you know, when you're sculpting. But, you know, keep in mind, this will also kind of alter your original geometry. So if you want to keep these curves, especially if you're simultaneously working with kind of this sculpting and normal mesh editing at the same time, then I wouldn't recommend you to use Dyn Topo. So, but let's see. So if we do smoothing, you can see it actually created more geometry on the fly. And as we start dragging around, or maybe I think the grab tool actually doesn't really create more geometry. We'd have to take something like the draw tool. Let's try to do this, and you can see, as you can see,
better, yeah.
Yeah, it's creating more geometry, yeah.
Also the smooth core.
Yeah. And also, if you use the smooth modifier, this will also, you can see there's a little lack of density here. If we do that, then basically, if we call this shift to smooth, then it's gonna smooth it around and create more geometry. But yeah, it's like, this is a very useful feature for that matter, because that's a very common problem with sculpting. And if you're not an experienced sculptor, you're almost guaranteed to run into it. So
very quick question, finish the topic. When I enabled this Dyn Topo tool, my thickness and all the other modifiers disappeared. Does it mean that if I use Dyn Topo mode, I can't use the standard modifiers, or I have to reapply them again?
I think, yeah, I think maybe there was a warning that said that
this is not reversible.
No. Oh yeah. So I haven't had modifiers applied, but yeah, it's basically, it has to destroy some things. Let's try to do a Solidify Modifier, and let's see. Let's try to enable Dyn Topo. Generative modifiers detected. Blah blah blah. Okay. So it's saying that keeping the modifiers will increase the polygon. Blah blah blah. Yeah, that we're fine with that. Yeah. So Solidify Modifier is not supported in Dyn Topo, but yeah. So as you can see, it doesn't remove them. I'm not sure if, Matti, you were talking about it actually removing the modifiers, but it shouldn't really remove them. It's just you probably won't see it when you're editing. So
Understood.
So yeah, but also, this. Yeah, so if you go back into the object mode, then it should actually work. They should pop back in. So now, Dyn Topo. Now, as we discussed in the presentation in the beginning, it kind of we discussed how bad triangles are for subdivision surfaces, and now we turned on Dyn Topo and everything is a triangle. So kind of bad, right? So how do we fix this problem? Well, Sculpting Tools, you have these remesh options. Remeshing, is of course going to help you. It's basically a technique where it looks at your geometry as it is, your ugly looking geometry, and it's gonna try to recreate your basically geometry into quads while maintaining the same shape. So let's try the remesh feature with default settings. And wow, that looks ugly. I'm not sure why it looks that way, but it's kind of cool in a way. Like if you wanted to create like a really cool looking landscape, this would be like a crappy way to do it.
Maybe because of modifiers.
No, I don't have any modifiers applied right now. 1 second. Okay. I haven't actually used the remesh features too much that are in the sculpt mode, but there should be another, or I didn't use much remeshing in general, but I have used it. So if we click on this object data properties, let's go to, there's this remesh, and there's this, you have two options. There's voxel and quad remesher. So I'm going to go to quad, and there's this quadri flow remesh, right? So let's click on that. Number of faces, maybe we can increase that to like 16,000, maybe. I don't know which number seems fair, but I guess we can turn off use mesh symmetry. because that can actually create some ugliness if you had symmetry enabled. So yeah, deselect all of that, and let's go OK, and then it's going to do the remeshing down here. So you just have to sit and wait while it does its job, and hopefully we'll have a nice mesh that we can work with. So you can see, yeah, we have a lot of geometry, a lot more than we did before, but you can see it's all quads, and we probably don't need that many. So if we go back, and maybe 4,000 polygons was actually kind of enough, I think. So you let it do its thing, and then it remeshes, and then you get this result. So, and number one, your geometry is going to be pretty much fully even. So if you were indeed kind of even with the Dyn Topo disabled, as you can see, if I take the grab brush and I stretch something out and create a bunch of ugliness, I can go into object mode. Make sure you're not in edit mode, otherwise quadriflow remesh will just won't work. You do that, and you can see it creates even geometry all across the board. So there you go. And if you're not getting even geometry, then maybe you can just increase the number of faces, but it should be even for the most part. So yeah, that's basically a solution to that problem. And you get all quads, and you can do this with any mesh. It doesn't have to be a mesh that is sculpted. So now let's get into some other like organic modeling tool set. So now let's say, so there's you know, some crazy architecture, maybe like this, or something similar to this. So if you so maybe I guess I can show you some tools that can help you achieve results maybe similar to this, or maybe with these holes or something like that. So yeah, so first thing I'm going to do, so I'm going to start moving a little bit faster as I've introduced you to the tools, and yeah, I'm kind of because of course right now modeling is not the primary thing we're learning, and so yeah, now we're just gonna run through it really quickly so that I can basically show, you know, the good stuff. So yeah, so I'm gonna add a plane, and I guess I'm gonna subdivide it once. You know, maybe I'm gonna do Control B, bevel this, and so that I can get a little bit of a more interesting shape. Yeah, so maybe Control R, add another loop here. And I'm just trying to create something abstract and organic, something like that, perhaps. And I'm gonna add a modifier Subdivision Surface. And there we go. Actually, we can make this a little taller. Maybe something like that. Shade smooth. Okay. So now let's get to the good stuff. Now, imagine if we wanted to basically poke a bunch of holes into this mesh. You know, this is now where we'll start using the power of modifiers to basically you know, get some extra ideas, or in general, you know, just we're going to be layering them up and trying to get some interesting results using just modifiers, because all of them do different things, and if you combine them and layer them up, you can come up with some maybe interesting ideas. So basically, yeah, I'm gonna, I guess, show you how to experiment with those. So what we're gonna do now is So there are two modifiers that that are kind of good for doing the thing that I want to show you. And this is, I guess, the most common one would be the wireframe modifier. So let's go and press wireframe. And what wireframe does, it almost looks like our mesh has disappeared. But if I turn off the wireframe inside of the viewport overlays, you can see that it kind of basically kind of almost created geometry outside of every basically edge and polygon, and kind of connected them together like this. You can also increase the thickness and create something like this. So first of all, you know, that's one quick way to kind of get this result. Now, what if you wanted to get even more crazy? Now add a subdivision surface modifier to this, and you get this. So you know, you can increase subdivision levels, and you know, this was a very easy way to get this shape. And imagine if you try to model this kind of, you know, by hand, it would be kind of, you know, not only it would be very difficult, but it's hard to experiment with. So it's very easy, so much easier to just do this with modifiers and, you know, just get ideas out there. You don't have to have the final image in your head, because you're just messing around with things and you're letting the software kind of show you what's possible. So maybe let's first, you know, I'm gonna, I think, add another subdivision surface, and I'm going to set this one to simple. So the difference between Catmull-Clark and simple is that Catmull-Clark is going to smooth your model. However, simple is only going to create extra geometry, but it won't smooth your model. So well, Catmull-Clark does both. And right now, what I want to do, so if I increase the enable the wireframe. Yeah, so I'm going to disable optimal display so that we can see we have created like this extra geometry here. And this will influence how our next subdivision modifier will look. So as you can see, now we're getting maybe a more organic looking shape. You know, it's not, or like organic is not really a very descriptive word, you know, to describe such specifics. But as you can see, we are, you know, it looks a little bit different. You know, this is how it looked before, and now because we're increasing extra geometry, now it's smoothing also between those points in the middle, and now we're getting this result. And you know, we can smooth this, we can add another iteration, and now it's looking even more sharp. And you know, you can get a bunch of different results like this and play around with them. Now, another way, let's say we didn't really like this grid pattern. We wanted it to be kind of more random, right? So what we can do is, so I'm gonna remove this subdivision modifier before, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the Decimate modifier, and I'm gonna place it at the very beginning, or no, yeah, above the first subdivision modifier is where I'm gonna place it. And so now it looks like nothing has happened, and that's because, so what Decimate modifier does is it's going to basically reduce your polygon count, basically, right? And this is very useful usually for optimizations, right? So when you have too much geometry and you want to decrease the amount of geometry, so instead of like 100%, it's going to be like half the amount of geometry, then that's very useful, you know, like that can be like a quick way to just reduce geometry for whatever reason it might be, whether it's a stylistic reason, whether it's a reason for optimizations, you use the Decimate modifier. However, you can actually, you know, what Decimate modifier does as a result of kind of decreasing your poly count, what it's going to do, it's going to, first of all, split all your mesh into triangles, right? Or you can actually, you know, for the ones that it didn't split into triangles, you can also triangulate those. However, I kind of like this variation of hole size. And so let's actually turn off the first two. You can see this is what the Decimate modifier does to our mesh. So kind of creates, it creates everything into triangles and all this, all this like non-uniform kind of breaks the pattern. And, basically what it does, we're kind of using it to create a new pattern for our geometry. So now let's go back. No, let's turn our modifiers back on, and maybe, so we're gonna set this to like subdivision level 3. Let's add another subdivision modifier and place it before the final subdivision modifier. And this is, so yeah, the one we're basically sandwiching it between wireframe and the last subdivision modifier. And this can kind of give us some interesting results as well. Yeah, let's set it to simple also. So now we're getting this shape, which is like this organic 3D printed looking shape almost. And yeah, you can kind of have fun with that. Also, you can play around, we're using the modifier stack. Everything is being generated. So the great thing about this is that, we can just kind of modify this ratio and, get a bunch of different results very quickly. Also, you can try a different mode like unsubdivide, and let's say iterations to 1. And what this unsubdivide does actually is very interesting. It will basically, it will kind of rotate the subdivision pattern diagonally. So, and this can give you some really interesting results as well. So if we increase the subdivision level, look, how we can create this kind of cool mesh looking pattern that doesn't look too uniform. It has these interesting round shapes, and it's just so much easier to create concepts. Imagine if you were trying to do this manually, like in a CAD software. Not only you're having trouble with just very organic round shapes, but you also don't have this flexibility of, that the elasticity that polygons give you, which is, this this is which is this kind of roundness and just this flexibility where, you can take one math function. If it works for one polygon, you can apply it to every polygon and get all these crazy results with very minimal effort. So, and like I mentioned, polygons have their own problems, like we discussed in the beginning of the meetup, but these are the strengths, and usually the strengths are, well worth it when you're doing that type of stuff. So, and using this, actually, we can try to even probably, let's do this. Why don't we, I'm going to copy this mesh, right? So Shift D, move this out the way. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the tweak tool, and tweak tool is actually very important right now, because when you're selecting multiple ones, you can see this one has orange selection, while this one's yellow, and the yellow one is our active selection. And so basically what we're going to do is we want to make sure that our object that has the modifiers, which we're trying to copy. So this is what we're doing. We're going to try to copy this modifier stack onto another object. So I'm going to select this one by holding Shift. So as you can see, this one's orange, this one's yellow. The yellow one is the active one, the one that holds all the modifiers right now. And basically when we take so object, I believe it's link and transfer data and copy modifiers. This is what we want. And now every basically model that's going to be yellow, all of its modifiers are going to be copied to other objects that are selected. So I'm going to select copy modifiers. And so this mesh is kind of intense. So this is going to probably take a while. Hopefully Blender doesn't crash, but you know, it's too late for that now if that happens. I guess we're going to have to wait a little bit. Hopefully it's not like 10 minutes. Otherwise we'll have to close Blender, unfortunately, but let's give it a second. You know, meanwhile, I should probably set the camera back up.
Oh yeah, it worked for me. Crazy stuff.
Oh yeah.
Although it has a little bit of issues, I suppose maybe thickness is missing with the.
Yeah, it should override the modifiers that you had before. So you know, you can maybe you would need to add them back. So this is, you know, kind of cloning the modifiers that the other mesh had onto your mesh. But yeah, okay. So I'm gonna turn on my camera back again. Okay, so I'm here. Let's put this away. Okay, so okay, it worked. However, yeah, you can see it's crazy stuff going on. We have, you know, this is way too much geometry, but I mean, it looks kind of interesting. I mean, if I were to turn this off, you can see, you know, this is no joke. But of course, this is a little too dense. We can maybe turn off the first subdivision modifier, and that should hopefully give us better results. Although Blender froze up once again, although I'm hoping it's not going to be, yeah. And as you can see, like, you can just copy that stuff onto other models and get all this crazy stuff. I mean, this feels like cheating, like,
Yes.
Absolutely crazy. So another thing, I guess I'm going to copy this one. So Shift D, right click because I want to use the regular move tool. And yeah, so now instead of using the wireframe modifier, so I'm going to turn these guys off. Instead of using the wireframe modifier, I'm going to use the skin modifier. And I'm going to move this kind of before. So yeah, skin modifier it kind of does the same thing as wireframe modifier, but it's a little bit different, right? So skin modifier, it creates like a different set of geometry, and you can do some smoothing, I guess. It has that feature, right? Don't press on this create armature. That is something we're not getting into. Armatures are actually something for character animation, but we don't really need that. I'm not sure anybody that uses the skin modifier really uses this create armature feature. So if we go into edit mode, so now actually it's looking kind of fine right now, but what you might find actually is when you try to use the skin modifier like yourself, then the thing is scenes have different scales, right? So now if I press the S key and scale this down, you can see that this is way too, now we have the same result, but it's way too dense. And you're like, well, how do I change it? You know, this wireframe modifier had this thickness feature, and this has this branch smoothing. This is not doing anything. What the hell? And the thing is, you actually have to do this kind of inside edit mode. So if we select this, there should be, I believe it was Alt S or something, or no, Alt S actually. Oh, sorry, I'm pressing the wrong key. Yeah, so hold on. I don't think that's the one. There is a shortcut that basically, or maybe let's press F3. Let's do skin resize. Oh, it's Control A. Yeah, there we go. Control A. And then when you start dragging, you can kind of size it up or down. And right now, so let's move the mouse away from the center. Press Control A so we have some room to drag down. And you can see we are resizing the skin modifier right now. So that's one important difference between the skin modifier and the wireframe modifier. So, but you know, well, both of them kind of do the same thing. They can give you different results. So yeah, I'm going to scale this back up. And you can see it kind of procedurally creates some geometry in between. So you're going to get more blocky results with this. So I'm going to remove that subdivision, I guess, because we don't need it. And now you're getting a different result, right? So this is also kind of an interesting one. So yeah, let's kind of leave that to maybe you can try out the collapse mode once again. And what else? Maybe we can try some, you know, the smooth modifier. The smooth modifier could give us some interesting results. So before we're subdividing, let's increase the, or no, let's leave the smooth factor to 1 actually, and let's do repeat like 10 times maybe. Okay, that looks weird. 10. No, wait, it was 10 before. 5. Let's move it above, maybe. No. Okay, we can play around with branch smoothing as well. Or actually, I have another idea. What if we try to do decimate over here? Maybe perhaps unsubdivide. Oh well. Oh, actually, I want to do this before. That doesn't actually make that big of a difference. So yeah, what else we can use? You know what? Actually, I guess I'll leave this example alone. And we don't have a lot of time right now. So what I'm going to do is, I guess I'm going to show you one last example, which is, I guess I'm going to duplicate this mesh. I'm going to remove its modifiers. Except, yeah, the subdivision modifier. I'm going to leave that one. And now I'm going to press E, extrude it down. And yeah, I want to connect these two things together. So the way we can do that, I guess, is, let's say if we can, okay, collapse won't work. That only works at edges. So let's do this. Let's select both of them. Let's go to mesh. Let's go to merge. Oh yeah, you can actually use this M dropdown. And let's do let's merge them at center. Select both of these, press M at center. And now we have this. And for now, what we actually want to do is I want to close down the mesh in the bottom. Because, and the reason for that is we are going to be doing some Boolean operations, and Boolean operations require meshes to be closed so that they don't create artifacts. So now, so I'm going to select a loop. So Alt and left click, and also Shift, so to select kind of the other loop because it broke somewhere in the middle. And now I'm going to press the F key. and this is going to kind of fill the bottom. However, this is one massive n-gon that we're creating right now, and we discussed how bad n-gons are, so let's try to fix that for now. I'm going to turn off the subdivision modifier, and we're going to kind of connect these things up. So I'm going to press K, and I'm going to split this n-gon into quads, basically. Yeah, so as you can see, so if we were to split it here, we would create a triangle. I think one thing that we could potentially do to avoid that is Control R, maybe. So I wonder. So this is a mesh full of quads, or actually, yeah, this is kind of, yeah. So this is what is giving us problems. Yes, we can move that in, and see. So as you can see, there's something I didn't notice. So I'm gonna split this way. Or sorry, this one's going to be dissolve edges. Okay. Perhaps. Okay, we're still ending up with a triangle, which is not ideal, but it's going to be fine for this case. And what else I'm going to do is, so we're turning back on the subdivision modifier. You know, actually, in a way, we don't have to really smooth the. Yeah, I think we'll keep the bottom part rounded for now. I think it looks kind of cool. So, you know, one thing we can do is, so by the way, actually, another cool thing is, so whenever we press like Shift A, imagine we're zoomed in and we want to add a cube. So we press Add Cube, and where's the cube? Actually, it's in the center of the scene, of course, but it's not really, Blender doesn't just place things in the center of the scene, it places the things where the 3D cursor is at. We haven't actually touched on the 3D cursor, it's this thing in the middle. So if we press Shift and right click, we can move the 3D cursor around and place it wherever we want. And now when we press Shift A and add a cube, it adds a cube, you can see where the 3D cursor is. So actually, if we wanted to add it kind of directly here, like in the middle, what we can do is also move the 2D cursor to our selection. So if we press Shift and W, I believe, oh sorry, no, Shift S, we can say cursor to selected. And now we snap the cursor to our selected object, we can press Shift A, we can add our cube. So now, what we're gonna do now is we're gonna make this cube a lot like taller and wider. So I'm gonna do, so what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna take this Sweep Selection tool, going to Polygon mode, I'm pressing the 3 key to kind of do that very quickly. And you can use 1, 2, 3 keys to kind of quickly swap between these modes, right? I'm gonna select the first face and the second face. Actually, no, we can select the whole, all the faces right now. And then I'm gonna grab the scale tool. I'm gonna scale these up, like really crazy, right? Kind of like this. And now what we're gonna do, I'm gonna take Array Modifier, and I'm gonna, so relative offset, I'm gonna place this above 1, kind of like this. And I'm gonna increase the count so that our model is covered into these kind of cubes, right? So I'm gonna name this mesh target, and this is gonna be our cutter, right? So what I'm gonna do is, believe on the target mesh, I'm gonna do, I'm gonna add a Boolean modifier, and I'm gonna set the set it to intersect. And for the intersection object, I'm gonna use our cutter. And now let's go to our cutter. I believe we would have to go into Viewport Display, and display instead of as textures as wire. or as bounce actually, as bounce. This would be better. And right now, let's move our cutter. And now what the intersect Boolean mode does is it kind of allows us to basically, the only place where the geometry appears, it's going to be where the cubes are kind of intersecting with our geometry of this target mesh. And this is, of course, we're getting some smoothing artifacts. We can kind of solve those by turning on auto smooth. And you can see we're getting this cool result right now. So maybe, and we can try to experiment with some more things. So perhaps, perhaps we can try something like, let's try Decimate maybe. Let's see what that gives us. You can try and kind of do the same thing that we did before. We can try let's try, let's go with the same wireframe modifier. Wireframe, yeah, increase the thickness and add a subdivision surface. Maybe make this one simple and then add another subdivision surface and get this result right here. Just increase maybe the thickness a little bit. 15. So yeah, as you can see, a bunch of crazy stuff. If you wanted to take this even further, the new Blender version actually has something called geometry nodes. So yeah, that will actually, right now, the modifier stack might be kind of limiting. You can get very great results with it, but geometry nodes is going to be like, that's basically procedural modeling. You can do whatever you want with it. So yeah, just go crazy with it. I could even show you probably some more techniques, but we're also running out of time. So I'll just leave. This is actually, I think, enough to introduce you to the program. If you want to continue learning it, you can just use the internet. We also host some Blender workshops over at Creative Tuesdays. Like I mentioned in the presentation in the beginning. So yeah, that basically wraps it up.